Hi, it's Cheeky Devil with ghost stories from the UK. I worked as a tour guide and also assisted as a historian on ghost investigations with various paranormal investigators to give historical information and general support them in a location called Sinai House in Burn-upon-Trent in the UK. Sinai is actually somebody's home, but part of it is derelict, but some of that home is rented out to paranormal groups, TV shows, etc. It has a reputation as being very haunted with a reputed 168 ghosts, with history dating back to the Druids and Romans and having an old Druid temple in its back garden, and through the centuries has a long history of monks, witches and many more, and has a lot of corresponding ghosts of this type seen here. I have worked at the house for years, and on this weekend it was just another day at the office, or you could say, night at the office. We had a booking from 9 to 2 a.m. in the morning from a couple who were experienced paranormalists, and had booked the venue for themselves, which just made the three of us. I arrived 30 minutes early to set everything up, and from the start things were not right. The cats that were feral were assembled in the kitchen when usually they were outside. They assembled in the centre of the kitchen, all four of them were circling around and staring into the centre of the room. Anyway, my guests arrived and went to the kitchen area. This consisted of the usual kitchen units and a table with 4 chairs in the middle. We sat at the table, myself and the wife at one side, and the husband opposite me. We switched the light off and they placed a ball with lights on it in the middle of the table. The lights could only go off by touch, and they also placed with electromagnetic frequency meters, EMFs, next to them in the middle of the table. We set ourselves in, and they asked if anyone was there. The lights in EMF meters went mad. The conversation with the spirit went on for nearly 2 hours, with questions given to the spirit, to him, and communicating back by switching the light on and off. And at the end of this they had gathered the male spirit had been hung on the tree in the garden and was a warlock. Inspired by this, the couple decided to try something else. The event took place in October, so it was around midnight by now and dark. Through the kitchen window we could see a security light on a garage opposite. They came up with the idea to get the spirit to communicate with them through the security light. So they asked the ghost to switch the light on and off to tell them how many of them there was. It flashed around 10 times, on and off, so they got braver and asked for them to switch the light on and off to answer questions, which they proceeded to do. This amazed my guest and, to be honest, spooked them, but not as spooked as I was, because I knew that there had been no electric to the lights for months. At this point the investigators decided they wanted a break. I would suspect due to them being a little freaked out. This did not help with the chair that the husband was sitting on had been pulled away from the table while he was sitting on it, and when he had sat totally still, and there was no logical explanation for it. After some time the couple did get themselves together and they decided they wanted to proceed with the outside light experiment. At the table in the same place is myself and the female facing the windows and the husband with his back to them. They asked the question if anybody was there to switch the outside light on. Nothing happened. We sat in complete darkness. Then they asked again. This time the lights fully went on, and standing around 20 foot away from the window were 8 shadow people of varying sizes, of men, women and children. My immediate reaction was to run out, but before I could do this the husband jumped up and screamed and slammed the light on, and the shadow people disappeared. The guy was visibly shaking and looked in a state of shock. We all stood there not knowing what to say, and then I eventually asked the husband if he had seen the shadow people as well. "What shadow people?" he said. "I saw something behind you," he stated. He saw standing behind me a large, dark figure in a black monk-type clothing, who just appeared and stared straight at him, with a blacked-out hole where his face was. After he had told me this, he told his wife they were leaving early, and left me to clean and lock up the house. When I was pregnant and had a small son, my husband and myself made the decision that he would go on permanent nights to earn the money, while I stayed at home with the kids. I've been on my own in a short time and strange things started to happen in the house. It started at night when the house was locked up and we slept in bed and would hear a loud crash downstairs, but not one crash, but like the whole of downstairs was being smashed up. Footsteps were heard on the landings. Things would also go missing and reappear. Smells of lavender and other female perfumes and a rotten smell were noted around the house. Worse was going to happen. I was heavily pregnant. I walked up the stairs and before I could get to the top step, in front of me was I could only describe as a massive figure standing at the top of the stairs. It was all in black, but looked like a monk. In a state of shock, I turned on the stairs to escape and fell straight down them. Worried about the baby, I got myself to A&E and got the baby checked out. It was okay, but A&E was suspicious of the bruising and quizzed me about how it was done, and I explained I had tripped down the stairs. I was discharged from A&E and returned home. For a while things were quiet in the house. One night, though, myself and my son were both asleep, and then suddenly I was awoken by my son crying and terrified. He insisted in getting to bed with me, too terrified to return to his room, describing the same thing I had seen at the top of the stairs. This time it was staring at him at the bottom of his bed. After this he slept in my bed with me not leaving my side. This carried on for several weeks, still with strange noises coming from downstairs, and items going missing, but no sign of the black monk was seen for some time. One night me and my son were asleep, and I was awoken by the gentle rocking of the bed, and then increasingly strong shaking, and there was at first a faint black mist in the room, which grew larger and darker. There he was, the black monk, staring at me. He seemed to stand still at first, and very slowly he seemed to glide towards me across the room, never stopping, staring at me. I don't know why I did it, as I should have run out of the room with my son, but I put the covers over my head and sat like that to what seemed like an eternity. When I was brave enough, I switched the light on to find just me and my son the only beings in the room. After this I was at my wit's end at night, not sleeping, scared of him coming back, and unable to sleep I got myself into the habit of getting up and making a drink and watching early morning TV till it was daylight. One night I stood in my kitchen making a drink, which was right next to the lounge, and as I boiled the kettle I could see something in the lounge. Not knowing if there was a burglar or an entity, I picked up a kitchen knife and steeled myself to confront whatever it was. I was not expecting what I saw sitting on my settee. It was a Red Indian, but not any Red Indian, but a chieftain. I could tell this by the long headdress. The surprising thing was I didn't feel scared of him. In fact, I felt great comfort by his presence. As soon as I blinked, though, he had gone. As the weeks went by, the paranormal activity seemed to stop, and a kind of calm came over the house. In the spring my daughter was born, and it seemed after that the presence of the Red Indians seemed to leave us, but also all paranormal activity left the house. I still live in the same house after 20 years, and nothing further has happened. When I first started seeing my wife, her parents lived in a large bungalow on the outskirts of town. I don't know what it was about that property, but the temperature in the building was always cold for no apparent reason. The house in general had an oppressive negative vibe to it. The unpleasant smells of rotting flesh, but there was no explanation for this. Objects disappeared and were found in other parts of the house. The worst area, though, was my wife's bedroom, and the atmosphere in here was very dark and depressing. This area was where most of the paranormal activity took place. When her auntie visited, she stayed in the room, and she stated she had heard a sound like a menacing growling and a sudden drop in temperature. Then her covers were pulled off her for no reason. Then something threw her and the mattress on the floor. Let's say she didn't stay a second night. After several years of knowing each other, we decided to get married now, as then we are a very close couple, and we decided to spend the last night before marriage in her bedroom. Our wedding ring was on a large bookcase at the other end of the room, with a large lip on it. We were just drifting off to sleep, and there was a loud clanking sound of metal hitting the wall. The wedding ring that was on the bookcase was thrown at me and hit directly above my head, but as I peered across the room I could see nothing there. The ring, though, to move across the room and hit the wall with such force would have to have been picked up off the lip and thrown with gusto across the room. We agreed that the ring shouldn't have gone far and would be easy for her to find the next day, so with great difficulty she managed to get back to sleep. I went to the church the next day to await my bride, and I waited, and she eventually made it to the church. When we eventually were Mr. and Mrs., she told me the reason for the delay. The ring that should have been by the bed was eventually found in a location nowhere near it, like it had been removed from that area deliberately, and this had caused the delay. Now this could be all coincidence, but I always felt that something did not want my wife to leave that house and maybe not marry me. Thank you for listening to my stories. Please put a like below, a notification, and I'd really like to listen to your comments. And remember to come back to this channel to hear more scary ghost stories. That's me checking out. Cheeky Devil.